Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I want to give a brief update. Thank you so much for everybody who left a little book emoji or a question on my 500 subscriber video. I really appreciate that. My plan is to pick the winner by random draw and also answer those questions over the weekend. So hopefully the video will either be posted over the weekend or very early next week. For today, I want to talk about my pile of shame. So essentially the books that have been on my TBR the longest. So these are not necessarily the oldest books on my TBR, but they're books that I have physically had in my possession for a really long time, and for whatever reason, I have not read them. And I think there are different reasons for the different books that I'll talk a little bit about. But if there are any of these books that you really love, if you feel like it is a travesty that I have had them in my home for so long and I have not read them, then please let me know and I will do my best to prioritize them. I have to say that the look of judgment that my parents give me whenever I go and buy a bunch of new books, knowing that I haven't read all the ones that are in my house, if that hasn't driven me to read these yet, then I don't know what amount of shame it would take. But regardless, here are the books that have been sitting on my physical TBR, some for decades, that I have not read yet. First, we have It by Stephen King. So I have talked a lot on the channel actually about how I really love Stephen King. He's my favorite author, but I also don't like being scared. So a lot of his scarier books I have put off because I know that it's going to make me really scared to read them. And this is exactly what happened last year when I read Pet Sematary. It frightened me and disturbed me so much that it took me months to get over reading it. I'm really glad that I read it because I really liked it, but it took a lot out of me to get through it. And I'm wondering if maybe it will be similar. If you have read this and you could tell me exactly how scary it is, I know there's some weird things that happen, some disturbing things, but how scary is it actually? Because I've been putting it off for a long time. So many people think that this is his best book. I have had this on my shelves since I was in high school, which was a really long time ago. I think this has probably been on my shelf for like 2 decades, 20 years. I have had this book and I have not read it. So if you think I should, if you don't think it's that scary, if I should just suck it up, then please let me know and I will try to get to it. I'll just lay it over here and try not to be ashamed. The next book is one that I have had on my radar for a long time and has been on my physical shelf, I think, let's see if there's a publication date on it. So this is Dune by Frank Herbert, a work of science fiction that I have been wanting to read for a very long time. This particular edition was published, I don't know, but this is my husband's book. He bought it because he really wanted to read it. And I'm gonna say it was around 8 years ago, maybe. I'm not entirely sure, but it's kind of creeping up on a decade, which doesn't look so bad when you compare it to it. But this has been on my bookshelves for almost a decade and I still haven't read it. And I think with this one, it is that I find science fiction to be more intimidating than fantasy. In fantasy, it's not even always that I know what to expect, it's that I know that I love so many things about fantasy. And some of the things in science fiction, I tend to struggle a little bit more. There is more of a disconnect with the characters sometimes. We're very theme focused, sometimes instead of character focused. And the stories can be a little bit slower, which I like sometimes. I don't mind books that are slower, but I don't know, there's just something about science fiction that intimidates me a little bit more than fantasy, and especially classic science fiction versus classic fantasy. I know that so many people love this book. I think that I will really like it, and it is actually, I put it in my book journal as one of the must-read books for 2021 because I want to read it before the movie comes out. So I am committed to reading Dune. I just thought it deserved its place on here because I have felt very ashamed about how long it has taken me to get through it. The next one is a book that I picked up. I got this at a farmer's market when I lived in Ontario. So that was in 2014. So that was about 7 years ago. And that is Lord Fowles' Bane by Stephen R. Donaldson. So the Thomas Covenant series is a series that my dad has been trying to get me to read, but also warning me about for a really long time. So when I was younger and I was reading a lot of fantasy, like a lot of Terry Brooks, Stephen King, a lot of that stuff, my dad had told me that I probably would really like Thomas Covenant because he knew that I liked complex characters, people that were morally gray, but he also knew that there was a particular scene in the very first book that I would have a lot of difficulty with. So I think I put off reading Lord Fowles' Bane for a really long time because of that. But I know what happens, and I feel like I can definitely read it now without getting too upset or without it taking me out of the narrative or anything like that. And I have been looking forward to reading this for a really long time. I know that these Thomas Covenant books were kind of one of the front runners of the grimdark movement, and I would really, really like to read them. This is one of my dad's favorite series. He's loved it for a really long time. And I do want to get to it. Like I said, this has been on my physical TBR for about 7 years, but again, my dad has probably been recommending it to me for about 20 years, and I just haven't gotten around to it. So if you have read the Thomas Covenant books and you enjoyed them or didn't enjoy them, then please let me know. Next up, we have the book Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson, which I believe is science fiction, or at the very least science fantasy. Again, I think I got this for Christmas. I believe this came from me reading a list that Patrick Rothfuss had published that were the science fiction fantasy books that he felt inspired him the most as an author. And if I had read it from that particular list, it was probably around the time that I was reading Patrick Rothfuss, which was around the time that he was putting out books, which makes that a pretty long time ago now. So again, probably coming up on 10 years that I have had this book on my bookshelf. I've heard really good things about this author. I've heard really interesting things about this book, and I would like to read it. I think it probably hits a little bit of those kind of literary science fiction notes. It's a kind of a melding of those two concepts, and I don't know why I have been putting it off. I think it's because I bought it because someone else had recommended it without there being any other particular underlying drive for me to pick it up. It's not that I had heard someone describe it and it sounded really great, or that somebody I knew personally had loved it. It was just an author that I admired had put this on a must-read list, and I thought, okay, well, I guess I must read it. And I got someone to get it for me, and then I didn't get around to reading it. So I would really like to change that. I would like to read all of the books on my physical TBR. And so I am hoping to get around to this sometime soon. If you have read it, please let me know if you liked it or not. Up next, and I already can tell you why I have not read this book. This is Jonathan Strange and Mr Norrell by Susanna Clarke. And this is a giant book. This book I got, I think, around 2011-ish, because the way that I came across this book is that I had read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and I was on Twitter, and there had been one of those tweets by, I think, Chapters Indigo, and it had said, "What's the last book you loved? We'll recommend you a book based on that recommendation." And I had typed in The Night Circus, and this is the book that they recommended. This is a Victorian-inspired fantasy. After putting up my last video about the authors who write the best prose, so many people recommended Susanna Clarke, which makes me even more excited to read this. I just have to get past the fact that it is a bajillion pages long, which I'm not even really sure why that bothers me so much. I read other books that are this long. I wonder if it's because it looks so much chunkier, if it's just because of this bind up, because of the size. Maybe if it was like a big floppy, I mean, this is like relatively floppy. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm trying to make excuses for myself, and it's not really working, but I have heard great things. I would really like to read it. My plan is maybe to read this one in the background while I read some light, kind of easy to get through books. Maybe I will read The Greatcoats and also read this in between so that I have something that's quick and choppy and something that takes a little bit more time. I know a lot of you love this book because you told me in the last video, but if you would like to kind of scold me into reading it, then feel free to do so in the comments. The next is a work of nonfiction. This is Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene. I have had this for quite a while. I think I have definitely had it since before I moved, which again, like I said, was in 2014. Sometimes I can tell by when it was published and so this came out, this is the 30th anniversary edition from 2006. I don't think I got it in 2006, but I think I got it maybe around like 2010-ish. So again, I'm not sure why I have been putting this one off. I honestly think it's because I packed it up. My books were in storage for years, probably 6 or 7 years. And this is just one of the ones that got scooped up and packed away and put in storage. And so I didn't have time to get to it, but I would still like to read it. I know Richard Dawkins had a big craze, like a big time where everybody was reading him when he wrote The God Delusion, or at least when The God Delusion was really popular. I felt like everybody in the entire world was reading Richard Dawkins, which is probably why I picked up this book, to be honest. But if you have read The Selfish Gene, if you enjoyed it, if you like nonfiction, then please let me know, because I would like to get to this one. I have a couple of works of nonfiction lined up on Libby to listen to over the next little while, but maybe before the end of the year, I can squeeze this one into the schedule. And the last, oh no, never mind, there's two left. So the second last, the penultimate, is Battle Royale. So this is a book that my husband picked up when the Hunger Games craze was going on. So I think he picked this one up right after Mockingjay came out, which would have been 2013, I think. No, maybe not. No, I think 2010, I think. So again, this is a book that we've had for about 10 years. My husband had enjoyed the Hunger Games, but had heard that this one was a little bit more brutal. This is the one that the Hunger Games was kind of inspired by. And so he picked it up and really liked it and had recommended that I read it. But at the time, everything that was being published in YA felt like YA dystopian. There was a lot. I had just read The Hunger Games and a bunch of other things, and I didn't really feel like reading anything else in that genre at the time. But it's been a long time since I read The Hunger Games, and like I said, my husband really enjoyed this one, so I would like to read it. It is also a translated work, so sometimes it's nice to read books that were written in other languages, read books from authors who come out from outside North America or the UK. So if you have read Battle Royale, then please let me know, because I would also really like to read this one. And the final book on this list is a work of literary fiction, and that is the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. I bought this right after reading Norwegian Wood, and I believe I read Norwegian Wood, I don't know, 10 years ago maybe. This one's probably been on there for 10 years as well, and I love Norwegian Wood. It is one of my favorite books of all time. I loved Murakami's writing. The fact that it is translated and is still so beautiful absolutely blows my mind. I know that Norwegian Wood is probably the least weird of all of his books, and that some of them are quite strange. So I feel like I don't actually even have a good grip on him as an author, because I have only read this one book that seems to be very outside his usual scope. But I had read, at that time, I had looked for some recommendations, probably on Reddit or somewhere, and this is the one that had popped up. So I picked it up, and then I never ever read it. And it's not like I picked it up and DNF'd it or started it and wasn't really feeling it. I just never picked it up. 10 years. 10 years. I have not picked it up to open it. I do not know why, because I loved his other book so much. Maybe it's because I loved his other book so much and I didn't want to interrupt that magic. I'm not sure. But if you have read more of Murakami and you recommend this book or any of his others, then please let me know, because I would really like to read more of his books. But that is my pile of shame. There are other unread books that I have. If you tuned into my bookshelf tour, then you would know that the very bottom shelf of these fantasy bookshelves behind me and the TBR cart, or the TBR shelf that I have upstairs, are also filled with books that I have not read, but those ones have only been picked up over the last few years, and so I don't feel quite as bad about not having read them. These ones obviously range from the last 7 to 8 to 20 years ago, so I really should get around to reading them. If there are any on this pile that you feel like I should read right away, please let me know. If you have any books that for whatever reason have been sitting on your own personal pile of shame, then please let me know, and I would love to hear about it and chat about them. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm hoping to have the winner of the giveaway up this weekend, and also to answer all of the questions that you so kindly asked. I will see you with another video soon, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.